Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to start a new topic, transport in plants. If you have the second edition of our book, that would correspond to sections 227 to 230. If you've got the third edition, then it's 221 to 224, but I think most of you, if not all of you, have the second edition. Okay, plants need carbon dioxide, water, and minerals, all of which they take up from the outside. Now, you should all know where carbon dioxide enters the plant and how, where water enters the plant and how, and where minerals enter the plant and how. Yeah, so hopefully you know the answers, which is that carbon dioxide enters via the leaves and how? Via diffusion. Yeah, so that's the physical process. Water enters, and I think you all know this, via the roots. And minerals enter also via the roots. Now the how for water and minerals, we haven't actually really talked about that very much yet. So that is something that you will be learning in today's lesson. On this slide you can see a really tall tree, 70 feet. That's roughly 21 meters. There are some advantages to trees for that, such as being closer to the light. But how does the tree manage to get water up its trunk? Because you know that water has to reach the leaves. Yeah, water has many tasks in the plant. You should be able to think of at least two of them. One is used in photosynthesis, yeah, and the other one is cell turgor. What is cell turgor again? That's when the water inside the vacuole presses against the cell walls, and that helps a plant that doesn't have a woody trunk to stay upright. It also helps for the leaves to not wilt. And yes, if the water doesn't have enough, if the plant doesn't have enough water, it will wilt. So this water that is used for several purposes in the plant, that is very important. How does it travel up the trunk of the tree? Hopefully we will be able to see the answer today. So on this side you see a tree on the right hand side, and on the left hand side you see three little pictures, and I'm going to talk you through them. So the tree on the right, you can see the roots, the stem, and the leaves. Or the stem is the trunk in the case of a tree. If it weren't a tree, we'd call it the stem. And the water needs to make its way from the tip of the root all the way up to the leaves, through the trunk. How does it do that? Well, it's being transported in a specialized tissue. Now, if you remember what a tissue is a group of specialized cells. I hope you can all finish the sentence in your heads. A group of specialized cells that work together to perform the same task. Okay, so the specialized tissue that transports water is called the xylem. Yeah, so the xylem, this is the xylem here. It's spelled X-Y-L-E-M, and on this little picture here, this is a section through a root. Yeah, so you cut through a root and you look at that with a microscope. In the middle you'll see this tissue with sort of very wide cells that has the form of an X, and that is the xylem where the water is transported. Now the water travels up from the roots and into the stem, and in the stem we find the xylem in a slightly different place, not in the center anymore, but on the outside. And sorry, this doesn't look very nice, but I'm just trying to show you where it is. So the xylem is in these positions here, and you can see that it is part of what is called here a vascular bundle, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about vascular bundles in a minute. So this is also a section through the stem. If you look at the stem as a whole, the xylem runs up here. So the xylem, this is the xylem. Yeah, this whole thing here is the xylem. Sorry, it's a bit hard to draw with my mouse. This is the xylem, and this is where the water runs up the stem. It's like a tube, like a big tube. And it's also shown here, down here, the xylem. You can see that the xylem is basically a bunch of hollow tubes. Yeah, and it turns out that these cells are specialized cells which differentiate, and then they die. And as they die, because at the beginning when they differentiate, there's cell walls between these cells, and as they then die to take up their task as a water tube, these cell walls, they disappear. And so in the end you just have a very long tube through which the water can run up all the way from the roots to the leaves. That is the xylem. Now it turns out that water isn't the only thing that the plant needs to transport. Yeah, water is very important, but the plant also needs minerals, and it also needs to transport sugars up and down the plant. So the sugars are the product of photosynthesis, as you hopefully know, and they need to be transported. Often they need to be transported from the leaves into the roots, because the roots don't photosynthesize. But sometimes, especially when the tree comes back to life after a long winter, the sugars actually have been stored in the roots and need to be transported up the tree, so that they can be used to make the first leaves and sort of kickstart the next season, during which the tree will be growing leaves and will start to photosynthesize again, etc., etc. So sugars need to be transported as well. The tissue that transports sugars is always associated with the one used to transport water, and it's called the phloem. So the phloem, let's see what color I can choose, hopefully one that everybody can see very well. Let's try this blue here. So this is the phloem, and the phloem sits in the root. It sits in these pockets between two branches of that X that is formed by the xylem. This is the phloem. Then you move up into the stem or into the trunk, and you can see that the phloem sits here on the outside of what is called the vascular bundle. So the vascular bundle contains both xylem and phloem. So when you look at the longitudinal view, as in basically if you look at the tree trunk or at the stem, as you would look at it from the outside, the phloem runs up in this direction and the xylem is on the inside of each vascular bundle. And here you've got an overview of the phloem tissue, and as you can see, phloem tissue is a little bit like xylem tissue in that it is long, but it does have the separations between different cells. So those don't go away, and phloem cells stay alive all throughout the life of a tree. So to summarize, for transport in plants, there are two types of tissues, the xylem and the phloem. And the xylem carries water and salts, which we also call minerals, and also it has a different task that I haven't mentioned yet, which is to provide support for the plant. Because it's quite a stable tissue, and it will avoid that the plant basically just bends over and lies on the floor. The phloem carries food substances, of which I've already mentioned sugars, and it also carries amino acids, which hopefully you will remember that amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. Now, xylem and phloem are together found in what we call vascular bundles, and they run from the roots through the stem or trunk and into the leaves. Yeah, so here's a little overview again. You've got a cross-section through a root where you can see the xylem in this cross form in the middle, and then you've got pockets of phloem in between. If you look at the height of the stem, you've got vascular bundles on the outside of the stem, and within the vascular bundle you've got the xylem on the inside and the phloem on the outside, and there's actually a small strip of tissue here that is called the cambium, and the cambium contains the cells that make the vascular bundle grow. So the cambium basically produces phloem to the inside, xylem to the inside, I meant to say, and also it should be red, so my xylem was red, so xylem to the inside and phloem to the outside. That is what the cambium does. Yeah, it's not super pretty, or pretty at all. Okay, I'll try again. So all I need is a little arrow. Yeah, so the cambium produces xylem to the inside and phloem to the outside. Then we go up into the leaves. In the leaves, we also find vascular bundles, of course, because we're saying that the water needs to be transported all the way up into the leaves, and the sugars need to be transported from the leaves into the rest of the plant normally. And so here we've got the xylem at the top of the vascular bundle and the phloem at the bottom of each vascular bundle. You can see that there is a big vascular bundle in the middle, and that's basically the middle vein of the leaf. When you look at a leaf, it has a big vein in the middle, and that's where the vascular bundle runs. And then you've got these little side veins, which all also contain a vascular bundle. Yeah, and for orientation, we've got the upper epidermis at the top here. Yeah, this is the leaf the structure of the leaf that we've already spoken about, and then we've got the lower epidermis at the bottom, and we've got all the layers that we had already discussed on the inside. So that's the palisade mesophyll, the spongy mesophyll, yeah, at the very top you also have the waxy cuticle, which isn't shown here. This is the same thing really, just presented in a slightly different way. You've got the root on the left-hand side with a xylem at the center, pockets of phloem. Then you've got the stem in the middle, where you have the phloem towards the outside and the xylem on the inside of the vascular bundle. And then you got to imagine that the rest of the stem is filled in by just like something equivalent to connective tissue really. It's just like filler tissue, and it's called the pith. It's just like a filler. Okay, and then you come to the leaf. So in the leaf again, you've got the vascular bundle, you've got the xylem at the top in the leaf and the phloem at the bottom. So here again, I'm going to draw it in with my colors that I chose, which was red for the xylem. Unfortunately, they chose blue here, but I guess you still get the idea. And then you've got the phloem. And the whole thing together is called a vascular bundle. Yet again, the same thing. So I think by now you know what we're looking at. Root, xylem with phloem. Yeah, here they've chosen the red, just as I had done it. And then in the stem, you've got the vascular bundles right on the outside, and in the leaves, you've got the phloem up and the xylem up and the phloem down inside the veins. Okay, so just a different representation of the same thing. Here as well, just a little comparison between the vascular bundles and stems and roots. So in a stem, always on the outside, and the root, you've got the vascular bundle in the middle, and then you've got the phloem on the inside. I keep saying that, I'm so sorry. The xylem on the inside and the phloem in these pockets, just all around. We've seen something similar to this, but I just wanted to say a few more words about this. So here again, remember what I told you, that these cell walls, they are present when the cells develop, and when the cell comes to maturity, they are being eliminated. That's when the cells also die, and so in the end it's just like a dead tube, which is very well adapted to transporting water. In the cell walls, there is a waterproof substance called lignin, and this lignin, it avoids the water escaping from these tubes. Yeah, so these are a few adaptations of xylem cells. They form a hollow tube, they have lignin in their cell walls, which is waterproof, unlike cellulose, which we find in all plant cells or plant cell walls, and that is not waterproof. And these cell walls are eliminated once the cell is mature, so that water can flow through. Water and minerals are only ever transported upwards from the roots to the leaves, whereas for the phloem, slightly different. We have these end plates, yeah, so the cell walls between these cells are still present, the cells are alive, and sugars and amino acids can be transported both ways, which means in the spring, and as I explained earlier, as the plant comes alive after the winter, sugars and amino acids are in storage in the roots, and they need to be transported up to the leaves, which are reawakening while new leaves are formed, if that makes sense. When the leaves are in place, then the main transport is, of course, from the leaves to the roots. But in principle, the transport of sugars can happen both ways. So we have seen the slide before. Hopefully now it makes even more sense than before. So to sum it up thus far, we have two types of tissues, xylem and phloem. Xylem carries water and salts, and phloem carries sugars and amino acids. They are found together in vascular bundles in root stems and leaves. And I've added on 2 points here, which is that in the xylem, water and minerals are always moved from the roots to the leaves, that's up, and in the phloem, sugars can be, and amino acids as well, can be transported in both directions, up and down. Okay, so you will notice that I have again my little pencil symbol on these slides. Now, whether you take notes on this at home or not, I sort of leave it up to you. I just put the pencil where I put it in class. So if you're keeping your biology book, which it's not a bad idea, but I realize that some of you will probably not do it. But if you are keeping it up, which I recommend, then this is where you would copy things down if we were in class. So this is something that you might want to have in your biology book. I will upload these slides as well so that you can download them directly and look at them, print them out, and keep them in your notes as well.